just because you're a millionaire or billionaire doesn't mean you don't have the same problems everybody else does. You
Yeah.
just have a lot more money to wipe your tears away with, right? It's because it's not the amount of money you have, it's what you do with it, how you use it, how you manage it that determines whether you'll have a rich life, not just necessarily financially, but
Yeah.
rich in everything, or a
Yeah.
poor life.
We describe money as energy. It's an energy and it's a current, this current that we exchange
Mm,
and it flows. And if you hold on too tight, you stagnate that energy flow. But
yeah.
also, if you are hemorrhaging it or your energy is leaking and you end up depleted.
And there's a few in there, and with no particular preference, just picked one out. I think I finished it in about 4 hours, just cover to cover, just demolished it. And my mind was blown. I was like, holy cow, what? Like,
Hello,
hey, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I am well, thank you. I am well.
I always forget that that's a fake background, and I'm like, that is the coolest room ever. Then I'm like, it's not real.
It is in my mind.
It is. It is. Yeah, you're manifesting it.
Exactly, exactly.
Oh, I love it.
To be
And then,
honest, it does feel like there'd be quite a few like cobwebs and spiders around this room.
oh God.
So I'm not necessarily manifesting that part, but it's a garden room, so
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've definitely had like, I feel like you said spiders, and I've been feeling like I've been manifesting a lot of spiders lately. Like, I literally had to put my hazard lights on and stop my car, and I knocked on the window of this couple and was like, can somebody please save me from the spider in my car?
yeah,
So good. Okay.
yeah,
So
yeah.
welcome to
Thank you.
Called Tales of Transformation. I'm Raji. I always forget to say my name at the start of these. So for the audience, that is my name. And this show, this channel is about me talking to people who are doing life differently. So that might be in the health and wellness space. I've had people who've come on, a fertility expert, for example, talking about how you can have healthier children in your 40s than you did in your 20s, for example. People who are doing alternative dentistry, people who have quit their jobs and are now making six figures, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that's why I wanted to have you on. I think you've got a different idea about what is possible financially for people. I think you've got a different idea of, how to step outside of the cage that we kind of almost willingly or unconsciously put ourselves in and trap ourselves in for a whole lifetime in terms of finances, and then that traps every other aspect of your life. So I'm really excited for people to get an insight into your wisdom and to see what you've got to share. So this is big. Would you like to tell us your background? Because I think that,
Yes. Hello. Thank you for having me on the show. So I'm Vig. I am a money coach. So I have a business. I coach under the name the UK Money Coach. And what I essentially do is I work with individuals and couples, kind of one-on-one, to help them to figure out how to manage their money better. Now, that could be a really broad concept to a lot of people, but in essence, it's really just figuring out what money do you have right now? What do you want it to do for you? What are your goals? And managing your money in a way that pushes you towards those goals, whatever those goals might be. Because money is a very emotive subject. And more often than not, if you're not managing it in alignment with your goals, you start to feel a little bit frustrated, a little bit anxious. What's the point? I'm in a cage. I'm just going along with the crowd. I feel unfulfilled. So a lot of that can come from just not managing your money in alignment with your own values. So I work with people to help them to better align their money to their values ultimately.
you were talking a lot about having this vision for your life and then making financial decisions, I guess, in alignment with that. So that kind of weaves into this concept of like us working for money versus us learning how to make money work for us and make babies for us. You want your money to make babies,
Money
basically.
babies,
Yeah,
yes.
money babies. What would you say? Can you explain that concept to us? Like working for
Yeah.
money versus money working for us?
For the mo vast majority of people that go through the traditional educational system in the modern era, you're effectively trained and coached and molded into a worker. And that's for good reason. And it's not to say that that's wrong, because economies, countries, they need workers. Workers produce output, output brings everybody up. That's the theory. On an individual level, maybe that's not fulfilling you. For a lot of people, it does, and that's great. If doing your work, you're doing a career is what's fulfilling for you, fantastic. For some people, that's not. If you think of like the typical individual, you're kind of raised to believe that you need to work hard at school so you can get good grades. You get good grades, you can go to a good uni to get a good degree, and then you got to come out and get a good job. Then you need to work really hard at this good job to make loads of money. And why? Because you've got to fund this really expensive wedding, you've got to buy a house, you've got to buy a car, you're going to have kids. And then you're trundling through midlife thinking, what am I doing with my life? Maybe I should make some changes. But now you're already burdened with this massive cost of living that your life costs. So you've got no alternative but to keep working. So you're working, you're working, you're working to get the money to fund your life. Your money's not necessarily working for you. You're working for your money. An opposite way of thinking about it is if you manage your money a little bit differently, maybe you can send your money out and it can come back with, as you said, money babies. Right? And that is where you don't just earn money and spend money. You earn money, fine. You've still got to work for the money to get it in, but
Mm.
then you put that money to work. Maybe you put it into a savings account. Maybe you invest it. Maybe you invest it in some sort of other asset where the money itself can grow. Maybe with a little bit of your help and guidance still. Maybe not. Maybe it's completely passive and you just send the money off to work in the mines and it comes back with lots of money babies. Maybe that's the way. But there's just this other side of the story, which a lot of people aren't really exposed to that much, where the money is working for you to bring you back more money versus you just doing more and more hours to get more money. And I think that's where that mindset shift comes from. Most people are just working for money and then wondering what their life amounts to.
Yes. Oh my gosh, so many things there because you spoke a little bit about the way our education system sets us up for that hamster wheel. I'm a bit of a conspiracy theorist, as I've shared before. I would say it's on purpose. They want us to be their slaves. But you know what? You do need people who want to be in that paradigm, or there are people who are happy being in that paradigm, and they have a beautiful purpose in this world. And then there's people who are like so incapable of being in it. Probably someone like me who's like itching, like, but I want to do it this way and that way, and I want to wake up whenever I want to wake up, etc.
Yeah.
Where it's a challenge to exist in the 9 to 5, like you have to follow the rules kind of world. And I wonder if someone was to homeschool their child and they wanted to have a financial curriculum for their child or for their
Mhm.
children, what age would you start that? And what kind of like give us an overview of what like that kind of from the start to kind of their teens, what that trajectory would look like and how you would create a curriculum that would make sense for a family that
Yeah.
wanted their child to be able to live very abundantly.
Interesting question. No one's ever phrased it that way to me before. First off, I'd just say that I don't agree that you would necessarily see finance as a curriculum, like an academic study,
Mhm.
right? And I like analogies, you know this by now, but if I was to draw an analogy to another similar skill set, let's
Yeah,
say, how would you teach your kids how to cook? Would you put them through a curriculum? Or would you say, hey, here's some carrots, wash them,
yeah,
right? And then as they graduate from that, okay, now why don't you try peeling them when you're safe enough to start handling a knife?
yeah,
And then you can start cutting them. And then look, we can make a salad. And now we can actually put it into a stew. And now look, we can do this.
yeah,
Same with money.
yeah,
So from a very young age, you could just start exposing them to money just by having a conversation around money,
yeah,
around them. You don't even have to be talking to them, just
yeah,
talking about money, introducing the concepts that there is this thing called money. Generally, people have to give something to get money, whether it's their time, whether it's something they make and they sell, whether it's a service they provide. We have to give something in exchange for getting the money back.
yeah,
And what's the point in money? Why do we need it? Because as a child, you probably don't appreciate that you need money to get things. You probably think you just ask for it and you get it because
yeah,
that's all they're used to.
yeah,
So, starting really basic, how would you introduce a child to money? Just talk about it. Let them see you using money. And it could be good and bad, but just be aware that we're trying to foster a positive, abundant mindset. So
mhm,
if you're constantly vocalizing in front of your children that, oh, we don't have money, money doesn't grow on trees, we've got to be really careful, you may be thinking you're doing them a service by explaining to them and making them understand that money is a finite resource and we just need to be a bit careful of it. But maybe you're over egging it a bit, and then they're going to live in fear as they grow up and not really know why because they just think that money's always going to run out, so I need to hoard it. And that's not an abundant mindset.
Mm.
Rather, there is a positive and a negative to money, but try and be more balanced in how you talk about it. And proactively, and for most people, it is conscientiously being intentional about having positive conversations about money. We've got some money and we need to go shopping. What should we get? Or, we need to book a holiday. Where should we go with this holiday? We've got this money saved up for a holiday, or, things like that. Just something positive that's going to spark their curiosity. They can see that money is just a tool rather than the end itself. Just collating money doesn't help anybody. You can't do anything with just money. You got to give it away again to get value out of it. So build on the giving it away. That's the value out of it. Now, to answer your question more specifically, like from a young kid to a teenager, the first things, conversations, exposing them to it, letting them handle it when you go to the shop when they're, I don't know. I mean, I do it with my daughter. She's 7. The youngest is coming up to 4. The 4-year-old is starting to like handle money and just see that there's this money. They all look different, etc. It's nothing to be scared of. When we go to the shop, obviously we don't do it so much anymore, but when you're paying cash, the kids can pay for it and they get the change back and they're counting the coins and, oh, okay, this is how this transaction works. So we remove any sort of stress or fear of engaging with people around money. So money's normal. Everybody does it, right? It's like one of those things. And then as they progress, maybe you can give them opportunities for making or earning or gaining money themselves. It doesn't have to be depending on your perspective. It doesn't have to be that they have to do work to get money. Obviously, that is obviously valuable, but maybe that's not the first message you want to or lesson you want to teach them. Maybe it's behavior related.
Mhm.
Maybe it's none of those things. Maybe it's something else,
Mhm.
right? Maybe you could teach them that the more self-care they engage in, diary entries, you write a diary entry and we'll reward you with this to reinforce positive behavior, something like that. Anyway, an opportunity for them to make money and then they can start collecting that money. So then they know what money is, they're comfortable with it. As they get older, they start to get money, but they're still not spending it. And then as they get older, they've got this money and well, what do you do with it? That's, I think, probably the most important phase of educating them about money is what are all the things that you could spend money on? Are some of them better than others? So with my daughter in particular, we've got these cool little money boxes, piggy banks, but they're not pigs. Little money boxes, 3 of them. One's got a label on it called spend, one's called save, and one's called share. Spend, save, share. So as the name suggests, there's a different reason for all of them. So at the moment, I've enforced a rule that whatever money she comes into has to be split 3 ways. But my intention is as she grows older, I'm going to let her decide on the split. But it also reinforces the idea that there's a share box, for example. If she wants to use the money in that box, it's got to be for shared value to somebody else, like a gift, or she can buy something and share it with somebody else. So it's the enjoyment of giving that she's experiencing at a young age,
Yeah.
and the others likewise. But then she'll get to start spending that money. The spend box is entirely hers. She doesn't know this yet, but when she gets to that point, I'm going to let her spend it on whatever she wants. Because she's also going to learn that if she goes and blows the whole lot in one go, she's got no more money left. So tough, right? Make the decision, live by it while you can afford to make these sort of mistakes.
Yeah.
And obviously, she'll then have to work, do whatever she did before to get that money again. She can't transfer it from one of the other boxes.
Mm.
So yeah, so then as she gets into, I guess, 10, 11, 12, she'll be spending a bit more. And then from my plan is from early teens, 13 onwards, I'm going to introduce them to investing. So saving and investing. Initially saving, and these are quite practical tips.
Yeah.
But as I mentioned, my daughter's got a save box.
Yeah.
I'm going to start applying an interest rate to it at some
Yeah.
point, probably before her early teens.
Yeah.
So that's also teaching her that there are ways to let your money work for you.
Yeah.
So if she doesn't touch it, she's going to get more and more and more interest. But if she starts spending it for anything, she's going to get less interest. So
Yeah.
it's reinforcing this idea that there are ways to invest your money where if you let it be,
Yeah.
it'll grow. I'm not yet thinking about introducing her to taxes, but at some point maybe I will.
You don't want to
Um,
break her heart yet.
yeah. Welcome to real world. But yeah, and then as she grows older, I'll introduce her more to investing. So I invest on their behalf right now. My plan is to show them what I have and be completely transparent. This is how much money you have in this account. Is this ISA, for example? These are the stocks and shares that I've been buying. This is why, and let them start picking stocks and shares with small amounts. And ultimately, when they get to 16 to 18, they can graduate from my curriculum and they'll take full responsibility for their accounts. And I trust, I haven't got there yet, trust that they'll be mature enough and educated enough to know how to handle it and understand the value in not going to splurge it, but also the value in splurging some of it. because what good is money if you don't enjoy it? So that's my roadmap for them.
Love it. That is the school of Vig, right?
Yeah, yeah,
When you initially asked, how would you teach a child to cook? I would say I'm a very good cook. And when people ask me, like, how do you cook so well? I say it's because I love eating. I love eating. When I'm in a restaurant, I'm like, this tastes really good. What do I think is in here? And my mum cooks really well. I've always enjoyed
right.
eating a lot. And I think that whole analogy and the examples you gave with your daughters is, yeah, it's the enjoyment of the result of cooking, the enjoyment of
Yeah,
the result of money. And yes, that isn't just for you to buy your things, it is also the community part of it, of like volunteering or sharing or buying gifts. Um, it's almost like a healing tool.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned in there that you would start with the concept of saving and then you would move on later to investing.
Mm.
For people who don't understand the difference between those two things, or they don't understand how to move from saving into investing, what are the first steps that you would advise?
So I think most people are probably familiar in a general sense of the concept of saving,
Yeah.
right? It's just put something away,
Yeah.
save it because you may need it in the future. You're not necessarily expecting it to grow.
Hmm.
So if you have this thing, like let's say I like analogies again. So let's say you don't know if there's going to be a harvest next year. You've got a sack of potatoes. I'm going to stick them in the pantry in case I
Hmm.
need it next year, right? Saving. You're not expected to go back and find, oh, they've multiplied. It's just a bag of potatoes,
Yeah.
right? But maybe you're thinking, well, when I come back next year, I might have a few more mouths to feed.
Hmm.
And I know my family's coming over, or there's a wedding, or I don't know, something. More mouths.
Hmm.
So just putting that bag of potatoes in the pantry is not going to be enough. I'm going to need more of this. Why don't I go and plant these? And in
Hmm.
a year's time, when I come back, maybe they would have grown
Yeah.
and I'd have more potatoes. That's investing.
Yes.
So you want that thing to grow into more than you have today.
Hmm.
That's at the simplest terms what investing is. You do that with money today. So savings accounts, quite common. They pay an interest rate. So you put your money in there at a percentage rate, you'll get some money back based on how much money you've got in there, which is great. That really just preserves the money against things like inflation. Inflation just erodes your money year on year. That just hedges that. But you're not necessarily expecting to come back to huge amounts of more money
Yeah.
with just saving. But if you need to grow the money, for example, like you want to buy a house in 5 to 10 years, just putting money in a savings account may not get there unless you've got a really high income and you can add enough to it. You need that money to go off and work and multiply and make money babies, right? That's investing. So in financial terms, you invest it into something like the stock market, into other assets. There's lots of different things you could invest in, but you do that in the hope, because it's not a guarantee with investing, you hope that when you need that money, that there's going to be more of it there for you. And that's essentially the difference between saving and investing from a financial perspective.
So someone that's new to it and that didn't know all the different ways that one could invest,
Hmm.
run us through a few examples.
So when it comes to investing, you're essentially putting your money into something called an asset, and an asset is then expected to grow in value. Now, the most common thing that people invest in worldwide is the stock market. So the stock market being a marketplace, effectively, where businesses go to get money, to borrow money, effectively, to grow their businesses. That's all it is. It's a bank. But the people behind the bank that provide the money are you and me and pension funds and big investors. They go to this marketplace and they say, I will give you this much money. And a company, let's call them Microsoft, come along and say, I will take some of that money and in return, I will give you a little bit of my company. That's a share. So on the stock market, stocks and shares are interchangeable. That's basically what's happening. It's a marketplace where people go and buy little bits of companies, and in return, they lend that company some money. And that's why companies are on the stock market, because it's an easy place for them to go and get a loan. So the stock market is the most common place where people would go to invest their money to see it grow. Much more so since the advent of the internet. Before that, it wasn't as easily accessible. But that's one asset, if you like. Another asset that a lot of people might be familiar with is property. So you could buy a property, whether it's a house or a hotel or whatever it might be.
Mhm.
You could buy a property. Now it's yours as an asset, and then you could rent it out. So then it's bringing you money. So that money that you've put in, let's just call it 100, whatever units, 100 you've put in, and someone's going to pay you five rent all the time, then that five is extra money that you wouldn't have had otherwise. You're only getting it because you invested the 100. So that's another asset or asset class that you could put your money into, property. And then there's all sorts of things. Anything that someone thinks is valuable could ultimately be an asset. People invest in wine, in art, in watches, in precious metals like gold, silver, palladium, etc., diamonds. These are all assets. And depending on your risk appetite, i.e., how comfortable you are with losing some of your money is essentially what risk is, how risky you want to be. Some of those may make sense. Obviously, there's pros and cons to property versus diamonds, right? Some of them might have a higher charge to play the game, sort of thing.
Yeah.
But the stock market is generally the most common because it's a low barrier to entry. You can start investing nowadays with as little as 10 or 20 pounds. So a lot cheaper than buying a house or buying diamonds. Another thing is how liquid they are, which is basically another way for saying how quickly can you get your money out if you needed to.
Yeah.
So a property, not that easy because you've got to put it up for sale. Someone's got to want to buy it. Then you've got to go through all the legal stuff, register it with the land registry. It could take 3, 6, 9 months to get your money out. Not very liquid. Wine potentially could be more liquid. I'm not an expert, but I guess it would probably go quite quickly. Stick it in the next auction and it's gone. Stock market with the internet, same day. You can liquidate, get your money out, very liquid. So there's pros and cons to the different things you can invest in, but there's a broad breadth of things you could invest in. One thing that I know you're probably going to ask, crypto is another asset class.
Yes.
I'm not going to put across any strong opinions on whether I think that's investing or not, but it is an asset class that people can invest in. I would argue that's probably more on the riskier side than the less risky side. But again, it's appropriate for some people. I always live by the motto, you got to be in it to win it,
Yeah.
right? So use it as appropriate for your goals. But yeah, cryptocurrencies could also be an investing asset class.
Why do you say that it's riskier than all the other options?
So with the risk is when you're investing associated for the most part to a term called volatility. If you think of a line that can go up, positive, down, negative. Volatility is how quickly and how frequently it might go up or down. Volatility could go up, volatility could go down. It's just very volatile, meaning it's
Yeah.
not constant. The more volatile something is, generally the riskier it is because it's a little bit less controlled, less predictable. You don't really know. It's not the slightest change in the breeze, it might go the other way. Cryptocurrency is at one end of the spectrum of that. It just goes up and down. There's not that much rhyme or reason as to why. Crypto bros will tell you otherwise, but the reality is it's more market sentiment that is driving crypto values or crypto prices. Market sentiment being what do the majority of people think is good or bad about this? And when they think it's good, they all want to buy it and the price goes up. When they think something's bad, the price goes down because they're all trying to sell it. That's effectively what cryptocurrency is on. And again, despite what others may tell you, the prices of cryptocurrencies aren't based on anything tangible.
Yeah.
There's no tangible asset. Compare that to a property. The value of a property shouldn't go miles up and down because if you've bought a house for 100K, it's not going to suddenly be 50K or suddenly be 10K or suddenly be 300K. It's generally going to be around 100K. It's going to go up and down. Again, based on market sentiment being if someone prepared to pay 100K, they might be prepared to pay 100K now, but when interest rates go up and they can't borrow the money to buy that house, the price of value might go down because less people want it. So it's still going to go up and down, but it's not going to go and match big swings like crypto might be. So that's a little bit less risky. The least risky thing you could do with your money in terms of saving and investing is just a savings account. So you put your money in a savings account and you get 4% nowadays, that 4% is going to be the same. It's not going to go up or it's just not volatile, right? Unless and until the Bank of England, for example, change what they call the base rate, which is what all of the bank rates are based on. If they change that base rate, then your savings account might change, but by 0.5%, by 1% at most, typically for the UK. So it's much more relatively stable, much less volatile, much less risky. So kind of on a spectrum, you've kind of got savings accounts, maybe property, and then crypto at the other end. So that's why I say crypto is a bit more on the risky side.
Got it. So going back to this concept of this cage that we often find ourselves in, and we're assuming that it's the type of person who's like, I know there's more to life than me clocking in and clocking out and listening to the demands of somebody else or to the rules of a certain workplace culture, etc. And they want to live life on their terms, right? They want to work, but they want to do work that they love that doesn't feel like work. And let's say they have a certain level of qualification. And I've seen this with people I work with where they're at one level and they think the freedom approach is to just get another qualification so they earn more. And the thing I say is that that job that you're now going to qualify into is going to give you the same frustrated feeling in a few years. The novelty is going to wear off. It's the
Mm,
same, it's just a bigger cage. It's still a
yeah.
cage, right? So, assuming that people understand that concept, that just going from, for example, I see this a lot, dental nurses who are like, they've been doing it for 15 years plus, and they see that there's more available in life, but they can't afford it. They're like, okay, I'm going to go and study to be a dental hygienist. I'm like, same thing. You're going to go spend all that money, struggle to juggle the education, and now you've got your kids and all of that, and you're going to come back and earn a little bit more, but you're still going to be frustrated. And that's great for some people because they just want a little bit more and they're happy and that's fine. If we're talking about the person that's like, no, I don't want the cage, and they're starting at a level that maybe isn't very high income, and how would you draw out the path of transitioning from employed work into doing your own thing? Let's say they have another skill that they can sell. So how would you kind of advise them to secure their finances whilst they make that transition? That was a very long way of asking a question. You were like, what, where is she going
So
with
where's she going with this? Right, okay.
it?
I think I got it.
Yeah.
So we've got this individual who is, let's just say, in a PAYE job. They followed the path that's been laid out in front of them, and that 9 to 5 isn't quite working. They have ideas about how they could quit the 9 to 5, and maybe they've got an idea for a side hustle that could potentially become a main hustle that doesn't follow the 9 to 5 mold. How would we talk about managing your finances to help you to make that transition? I would always say go for it, firstly, but you need to have a balanced view and a bit of a realistic outlook. And when I say that, I don't mean it in the sense that you shouldn't do it. Absolutely
Mm.
explore it. But as you kind of highlighted, you need to stabilize and secure your finances because there's some things in life that are non-negotiable, like a rent or a mortgage or food, right? You have to cover those things. Some things are not non-negotiable, like whatever it is might be for you. It might be traveling, it might be socializing, it might be all these other things that you don't really care that much about, and you're willing to forego if
Mhm.
it means it can move you towards the other path that you want to go down, which admittedly, by your own explanation right now, you may not have the funds to be able to do both straight away at the same time. So it comes down to a prioritization and a bit of a self-reflection to figure out yourself what is important to you. What are your priorities and how quickly do you want to achieve this? Let's just say you've done that. You've got an understanding of what you're spending your money on today and you know what it's going to take to move to the other side. You're going to have to reduce some expenses to give you the opportunity, the time and the breathing space to develop this side hustle. And the reason I say that is because you've got a certain income today and you've got certain expenses today. And for simplicity's sake, let's just say you don't have a huge amount of money saved left over each month. How are you going to make that jump?
Yeah.
You're going to have to cut back on your working hours to give you enough time to start working on the side hustle, or you're going to have to work at overtime on the side hustle to make it work. But you need money to probably get that side hustle going. It might be materials, it might be to cut back on working hours to give you more hours to work on the side hustle, any one of these things. But expenses are probably going to go up a little bit or income's going to go down. So you need to find a way to make that work in your current budget. So then it comes down to just really being clear on what is your current budget today? Where can you cut a little bit to create that space to then fill with your passion, your side hustle? And obviously, when it's your passion, hopefully it won't feel like too much hard work. The amount you can cut back on to make this space, the sustainability of that is what's going to let you know how long you can keep going before you burn out financially, mentally, emotionally. But then it's really just a case of trying to progress as fast as you can. I'm a big fan of the phrase fail fast and pivot. So even in your side hustle, don't be shy, go all in, and fail fast because you're only learning by failing. If you haven't failed, you're not learning anything. And then when you do fail, you're going to be screwed. So the more mistakes you can make, especially early on, the better. Fail, 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 fail. You learn how not to do it and you'll end up on the right path. So fail fast, pivot. And again, depending on what it is your side hustle is, presumably it is something that's going to generate an income. Try and start generating an income straight away and use that itself to start learning. And hopefully the income from that can fill the void where you've been cutting back anyway. So you're back to neutral. And then over time, it's a case of just balancing your time, I guess, and just trying to pivot from one to the other. As a money coach, I don't tell people what I think they should do.
Yeah.
I try to guide them to consider all the available options and then understand with them what's probably going to be the most suited to their scenario. So I would say to them, you could just quit your job and then start working on your side hustle. Just stop one, start the other. That's one end of the spectrum. If
Yeah.
you've got the finances built up to give you runway to do that, where you're not earning money for 3, 6, 9 months to give you time, then maybe that's the right decision for you. If that fills you with dread, maybe there's a bit of a halfway house where, for example's sake, you're doing 5 days a week in your day job, cut it down to 4 days or 3 days. Your income's going to go down by 20, 40%, but maybe that's enough because your living expenses are okay and low enough. And then you use that 1 to 2 days to build the side hustle until it gets to a point where you can shift it to all the way the one way or the other. Or if you can't afford it and you haven't got the finances built up, you have to work 5 days a week to support your life, then evenings and weekends are your friend, right? No other choice. You just kind of got to go with it and do it in your spare time until hopefully it's at a point where you think, actually, now I can cut back on my day job. But yeah, there's no one straight answer for everybody. And as always, it's not an all or nothing. There's always going to be a spectrum of what you could do.
I mean, that sounds very much the journey that I've been on.
Mm,
I used to do 6, 7 days a week, and now I'm on about the averaging around 3 days a week, and that's
okay.
possible. And I still get to do the things I like to do. So, but it takes a lot of sacrifice initially,
Yeah.
a lot of hard work, and putting money aside, and courage, and all of those things, the failing fast piece. What do you think is the mindset that sets people that become millionaires apart from those that just say, "Oh, it would be nice to be a millionaire"?
Intentionality. Unless you're a lotto winner, but even that's a little bit intentional because you didn't buy that lottery ticket by accident. But yeah, it's intentionality for me, the first thing. And the second thing is daring to dream.
Yeah,
So a lot of people that just say, "Oh, it would be nice." They're not even allowing themselves the permission to just dream
yeah,
and imagine a reality where that might manifest for them.
yeah,
So that's a key thing. But dreaming alone doesn't get you anything, right? You've got to be intentional and actually take action behind it. And obviously, it isn't the standard, it's not a blanket thing. But I would imagine for a lot of people that are millionaires, multimillionaires, it didn't happen by one accident or two accidents. There's a number of intentional actions that they've taken in sequence that has driven them down this path. So they've allowed themselves to dream. They've really honed in on their vision of what it is they want to achieve, and they've taken direct action, intentional action to get there. And it's a drive. Not everybody has that for whatever reason, and it's okay if you don't. And it also depends on what values or goals people have. Not everybody wants to be a millionaire. Some people are fine just to have what we might call the cage or the ordinary life,
yeah,
and that's absolutely fine. They're happy just having their family around them, having a nice home, that sense of comfort and freedom and success that the majority of people have, and that's absolutely fine. We note the millionaires and the billionaires because there's not that many of them. So it stands out. And you're like, oh, how did they do that? And they've obviously done something a little bit different to 99% of the rest of us. So they stand out as big examples, but who's to say they've got it right? Just because you're a millionaire or billionaire doesn't mean you don't have the same problems everybody else does. You
yeah.
just have a lot more money to wipe your tears away with, right? Um, so the grass can seem greener on the other side. But yeah, that's probably what I would say, intentionality and just allowing yourself to dream.
Yes, it's very true. Money is an amplifier, I guess. So if you've got all these toxic things happening, if you're addicted, if you have an addictive personality and you do all the right actions to get that money, you're just going to feed that behavior. But if you have a giving, loving, family-oriented attitude, then you're going to have more money to do that. So it is going to amplify whatever foundation was there before. Yeah.
Absolutely. I actually see that with clients and just through experience. But a lot of people think that, oh, I don't have enough money each month, or I'm in lots of debt. If only I had more money is a common one, right? If only I had more money, all of my problems would go away. But
Mm,
then I'm drawn to these examples that, again, because they're outliers, you've probably heard of them, but these millionaires that win millions in the lottery, but then within 3 or 6 months, they're flat broke again. It's because it's not the amount of money you have, it's what you do with it, how you use it, how you manage it that determines whether you'll have a rich life, not just necessarily financially, but
yeah,
rich in everything, or a
yeah,
poor life.
yeah,
So just throwing money at a problem doesn't necessarily solve it. It might plaster over the cracks, but they're still there and they're going to come through eventually. Which is why a large part of my coaching is working with clients to understand what's going on behind the scenes. Some
Mm.
of my clients have got, exceptional amounts of income. Some of them don't. But generally speaking, they've all got similar things going on in the background, the mechanics of how they're managing their money, how they're viewing their money, how they feel emotionally about money. And if we can solve for those, then whatever money they do have already, they're going to end up with a lot more of it by the end of the month versus what they do now. And then also we can obviously try and find ways to bring more money in, but through saving, investing, upskilling, etc., reducing expenses. But ultimately, it's that base framework of how they think and manage money is what's key.
Yeah, you mentioned debt and people having those attitudes where they think the money will solve the problem. How do you, because it's not only teaching them the techniques of, managing their finances better, it's also managing the way they're thinking about how they relate to money. How do you usually start with those clients who have kind of downward spiraled with their finances, that just don't know where to begin in terms of resolving their debts? It's here, there, and everywhere. How do you navigate that path for them? Just kind of the arc.
Yeah, so the initial thing that I find helps is for a lot of these people who have challenges with debt, obviously they're coming in with a negative mindset. They usually work themselves into a bit of turmoil, a bit of an emotional hole. The thing that I find works well for them as a first activity or exercise is to show them what's possible.
Yeah.
Just using the money that they have, their budget that they have, if we were just to do things slightly differently, and this is a relatively quick exercise, because I can just say if we cut back on all these expenses which you told me you don't care about, and we were to put that towards debt in a more intentional manner, this is what could be possible. In a year, in 2 years, in 3 years, you could be debt free. How would that feel?
Mm.
And bar none, they're all like, oh my God, I didn't even realize this was possible. How do we do this? So that they just need to be shown what's possible,
Yeah.
which is the end goal. We
Mm.
know what they're doing right now, which is why we're talking, we're looking at their money.
Yeah.
And then I just help them to plot a path from where they are now to that end goal. And when it comes to debt pay down in particular, there's a number of different strategies, but ultimately you're paying down debt. The different strategies just align to your personal preferences, your emotional preferences of how you might choose to prioritize one debt over the other. That's all it really comes down to. But we've worked through those and we put in place a plan which would effectively have them allocating some of the money that they have today, not against something else that they don't care about, but instead directing it towards their debt. And over time, they'll be chipping away at that debt. And there's various tools that I use to help them stay on plan, to
Mhm.
help them remain accountable, mainly to me, so that they can see each passing period, whether it's 2 weeks or 4 weeks, we can see that debt balance just getting chipped away and chipped away and chipped away. And we structure it in such a way that we maintain motivation. So one strategy, for example, paying down debt, regardless of what the interest might be, is you tackle the debt that's got the smallest outstanding balance. So if one debt's got 500 and one debt's got 2,000 left over, even if the 500 has the much smaller interest rate, of say 1% and the other's got 20%, maybe let's tackle the £500 one first, because
Yeah.
psychologically, you'll pay that off much quicker than you will the 2000. But
Mm.
once you pay it off, it's a huge mental boost to say, hey, I
Yeah.
can do this. I've just paid off the debt. This is
Mm.
incredible. Let's keep going.
Yeah.
So there's various strategies you can employ to keep the client motivated on that path to paying down debt. And it's then just more providing them with more positive reinforcement as they go,
Mm.
showing them that they are capable, empowering them to take ownership of it and drive it forward. And by the time they've paid off their debt, their mindset hopefully is not necessarily completely changed, but it's a lot better. They've proven themselves that they are good with money. They're not bad with money. A lot of people come to me and say, oh, I'm terrible with money. But when you look at their finances, they're not terrible with money. There's just a couple of little areas where maybe they're not prioritizing the right things. But the rest of their money isn't terrible. Like there's no good and bad with it. It's just different ways of doing things. And that itself can change for any individual at different points in their life because we evolve, our finances evolve, our needs evolve, our goals evolve. So what might be good for you in your 20s might not be good for you in your 30s. So I don't particularly like the labeling of good and bad.
Mm.
But yeah, so that's generally how I work with the clients to kind of figure out where they are now, show them what's possible, and work with them to bridge that gap and then keep them accountable along the way.
It kind of reminds me of this concept in the little spiritual world of how we describe money as energy. it's an energy and it's a current, this current that we exchange
Mm.
and it flows. And if you hold on too tight, you stagnate that energy flow. But
Yeah.
also, if you are hemorrhaging it, or all your energy is leaking, and you end up depleted. And so it's not that money is good or bad, like you said, it's neutral, but it's the relationship you cultivate with that energy and
Yeah.
consciousness that emerges from that. And that evolves and changes as you do. But also, this idea, I say this a lot, I love money and money loves me. Like it's a relationship, right?
Yeah.
It's got its own consciousness. So you want it to love you back.
Yeah,
And
yeah, absolutely.
so those who are suffering with debt, you borrow that. By the way, money loves you. I love that. In terms of those who are just starting off with a business, so we're going to talk taxes. So those who are starting off with a business, I guess it's easier if you are fully self-employed because, you've got that one way of money coming in, and so you can manage it, your taxes in one specific way. But if you're someone like me, for example, I have self-employed and PAYE income. What do you think are the best ways of managing taxes so that you're legally, of course, so you're not overpaying? Because I know quite a few people in that boat where they're making that transition between being an employee and being fully self-employed.
Hmm.
And the biggest challenge is a lot of money is going to the tax man, and there must be another way. Surely you're going to say no, there's not.
Not ways that I want to talk about here. When you do, if you do start a business or side hustle,
Yeah,
you can set yourself up in a couple of different ways from a tax perspective.
yeah,
Well, from a legal perspective that have an implication on how you're then taxed. So the two main ways are self-employed or sole trader, they call it, which is just it's just a one-man band sort of thing. You're going out there doing something, you're earning money, you declare that money for taxes, but that money is effectively just getting paid into your current account. Your expenses are going out to that current account. It may even be the same current account you use for your normal income and expenses. So you're not doing anything different.
yeah,
You're just going out and earning money.
yeah,
That's one way of doing it. And as you mentioned, that's probably the easiest way to do things just because it doesn't involve any material change from you.
yeah,
But when you do that, you have to be super careful to track separately
yeah,
what income is coming in and going out for the business that you're now running versus anything that's not business.
yeah,
Even if you don't have a PAYE, you may have people transferring you money for whatever reason, and you may be spending money for your groceries.
yeah,
You need to keep a clear record of what's for the business and what's not for the business. Because when it comes to declaring for tax, they're going to look at you to say, well, what have you earned as a business owner? And then tax you appropriately for that.
yeah,
If you have a PAYE in this example, then you'd have business income and then you have a PAYE income, same difference. You got to keep very clear records of what's business and what's PAYE.
yeah.
The other way of setting yourself up is as a limited company,
Hmm.
or one of the other ways. This again is a legal position rather than necessarily a tax position, but it has an implication for tax. This for a one person business probably doesn't make sense as much because there's some costs involved to setting up a company. They're not high,
Yeah.
but you've got to register a company, which is only about 20 quid. But then once you're a company, you're legally required to produce accounts every year. And for that, more often than not, you'll employ an accountant and they'll charge you a couple of hundred quid every year to make these accounts. And then the tax return for that company. And then you'll be a director. So you then have to do director's accounts and director's tax returns. So all these costs add up. Now, if your business is a runaway success straight away, it may make sense to do this, but you're probably going to make the decision based off of the legal status of the company versus the tax implications. But a lot of people think that opening a company is a good idea because companies are taxed at a lower rate of tax than people are. Companies at the moment, small rates is 10%. People are 20%. So you think, oh yeah, I'm going to pay less tax. But the catch is if you set up a company for your business and you're earning money, that's the company's money, not yours. So the company might only be paying 10%, but you can't do anything with that money because it belongs to the company.
Yeah.
At the point at which you transfer it from the company to your account, you have to pay tax again because that's now income for you. So if you set up a company and you earn money into it and then you move all that money from the company to you individually, you're going to be paying just as much tax as if you were just self-employed in the first place. So that's the main headline. there's a lot more nuances to this
Yeah.
that listeners who are familiar with it will be like shouting right now, like, oh, that's not the full story. There are nuances to this, but we won't go into the detail right now. But there are differences in terms of how expenses are treated and all of that, which may make one better than the other. Um,
Yeah.
in terms of the comment you made about, you have some friends who are, overpaying on tax.
Mm.
If anything, the one thing that HMRC is good at is not only telling you when you haven't paid tax,
Yeah.
but they'll also tell you when you've overpaid tax. So
Yeah.
if you have made the mistake of paying too much tax,
Yes.
they will absolutely know about it and they will say to you, you've overpaid tax, and
Yeah.
they'll put it against your future tax bill. So you should never be out of pocket
Yeah.
indefinitely
Yeah.
if you overpay tax. But I guess the question you're asking or challenge you're talking about as well is how do you estimate how much tax you do owe? Right?
Mm.
PAYE is straightforward because by the time you get the money, your
Yeah.
employer's already accounted for the tax and you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
Once you start a business, you need to start thinking, well, how much did I earn? And where does that put me on the tax scale between, 0%, 20% tax bracket, 40% tax bracket, and how much tax do I then need to pay? That really is more of an estimation because you'll know how much money you've earned. When you do report for business purposes how much you earned, you are allowed to deduct certain expenses. So you look at how much you earned, less the expenses that you think you're allowed to deduct. What's the leftover? Multiply it as an approximate if you're 20% or 40%. As a ballpark, that's how much you have to pay. But with HMRC, obviously, you file your taxes 9 months after the end of the tax year. So you've got 9 months after that period is finished to figure out how much did I earn, how much did I spend, what's my overall value. So it shouldn't be too difficult to get to a pretty accurate number for
Yeah.
how much tax you have to pay. But if you're just starting out and you've not got that history to go by, just start putting away, if you're a 20% taxpayer, every time you get income for the business, just siphon off 20% and put it in a savings account. And you say, well, that's probably going to be my tax bill. If you're a 40% taxpayer, 40% in there, and you're not going to be far off. If anything, you'll be overpaying a little bit. But like I say, it's better to be over than under because if you
Yeah.
underpay tax, there may be penalties, there may be interest. So err on the side of caution. You'll still get that money back if you overpay it.
Mm. Yes, a really interesting piece about the expenses and deducting that from what income you've made because you're only paying whatever's left on top.
Yeah.
I've heard the other trick is to just spend a lot on the business. What happens if you spend so much on the business? Let's say you do, because I know a lot of coaches, right? So they spend a lot on courses, um, which are benefiting them. They're learning more skills, which adds to the business and what they're able to deliver to their
hmm
clients. So much so that I've heard someone spent so much on courses that she spent more than the income. What happens in that situation?
So the thing with business expenses, and this is the view that HMRC will take,
Yeah.
you can only ever deduct expenses that are wholly
Yes.
in pursuit of the business,
Yes.
like wholly support the business.
Yeah.
Even for coaches, you've got to be careful
Mm.
what training or coaching or education you're going on. Because if you can't prove under inquiry by HMRC that this is 100% benefiting your business, they may challenge back and then implications, penalties, interest, and all of that. But let's just say, for argument's sake, that it's all kosher
Yeah.
and you just have spent more than you're bringing in. That's fine. Startups generally do spend more than they bring in because you've got to ramp up to get to a position of maturity where you can then start bringing in clients and earning the money.
Yeah.
In that situation, as a business, if you've spent more than you earned, it's called a loss.
Mm.
And in your tax return, you would put, I brought in this much, I spent this much, one minus the other ends up being a loss. That becomes a loss that you can carry forward in future tax years.
Yeah.
So next year, say you don't spend more than you earn, so you end up with a profit. That loss that you've carried forward would then offset the profit for next year, and you may be able to reduce how much tax you pay then.
Yeah.
So again, as a business owner, it's really important that you start keeping accounts. Even if they're not formally, it might just be a notes or a
Yeah.
Excel or something,
Mm.
but separating your income and expenses for the business by tax year and keeping really clear records is really important, not least because HMRC legally oblige you to keep records for 6 years. So at any point, they can come knocking and start an inquiry and say, right, you submitted this tax return where you said you got a loss carried forward and you're paying less tax because of it. Show me your calculations.
Yes.
And you should be able to show that. If you have an accountant, you should be able to defer to them and say, accountant, go and answer this question for me. But
Yes.
ultimately, you're responsible. So even if the accountant doesn't have the information, they're going to turn to you and say, well, you didn't give me the information, so you need to speak to HMRC.
Yeah.
And worst case, HMRC may say, well, we don't believe that you had a loss. So we're going to tax you as if you didn't. So now you owe all this extra money for tax, penalties, interest, and all of that sort of stuff. So yeah, so that's what happens. If you have a loss, carry it forward, you can offset it against profits in future years.
There you go, all you coaches. That's the answer. I love it. That's actually really useful. I've had that scenario a few times, so very interesting. Three books that you think are must reads for people who want to become financially literate.
Ooh, that's a good one. Okay, in no particular order, I can
Mhm.
think of, actually, no, I've got the three. Got
Okay.
it. So by far, my favorite one, and it comes down to they're all obviously directly finance related,
Yes.
but by far the one that spoke to me the most was a book called The Richest Man in Babylon.
Okay.
I forget who wrote it. It's not as old as it might seem when you read it, or if you're an audiophile, listen to it.
Yeah.
But it's written in a parable sort of style.
Yeah.
So when you read it or listen to it, you're thinking, is this out of the Bible? Like it's mad. The old language and
Okay.
just the way you have to go and check it out. But
Yeah.
it's absolutely fantastic. It's got so many incredible lessons that are so well articulated. And you think this is just going to stand the test of time. I feel like this coming to me from the Old Testament. And
Mm,
it's really basic stuff. It's not talking about investing in the stock market. It's not talking about asset classes. It's not talking about interest. It's talking about all similar concepts, but in old language, old money, if you like. And
mm,
it's basically teaching basic principles like live within your means,
yeah.
save a portion of everything you earn, save it, treat others with respect and stuff like that. But it's an absolutely fantastic book, and I got through it so quickly. I prefer audiobooks,
Mm,
and the way it was narrated was fantastic. So that's my, I said no particular order, but that's actually probably one of my favorites.
yeah. It's number one.
The
Yeah.
second book is called The Simple Path to Wealth by a guy called J.L. Collins. He's an older gent from the US. I'm not sure actually. I did look into him, but I can't recall whether he's from a financial background or not. But there's a really nice backstory to this book. So J.L. Collins had a kid at least. I don't know if he's got more, but he has a kid, which is the subject of this backstory. Um, and he's managed his money in a certain way his whole life, just never really thought to talk about it to anyone. And then his daughter went off to university or she left home or something like that. And they used to communicate by letter in the
Yeah.
olden days.
Yeah.
And at some point, she must have been asking some sort of money advice or something. So he sent her a series of letters. I think there were 6 or 7 letters. And in each letter, it progressively built on the previous one as to how he managed money and how he suggests she manages money.
Yeah.
And then I think he was on in the when the internet was starting to come around, all these bulletin boards and messaging boards and stuff like that. He was in some sort of Reddit or Reddit equivalent for finance. This conversation came up about, well, how do you talk to your kids about money and how should I talk to my kids? How should I educate? And similar to the question you asked earlier. So this guy basically typed out or copied, I think, the letters that he sent to his daughter as a series of posts, 6 or 7 posts, and said, well, this is what I said to my daughter. And the rumor or whatever goes, the story goes that the people that were on this board read it were like, JL, this is fantastic. You should turn this into a book. So he did. And now it's one of the world's best-selling finance books. But again, because I'm an audio book fan, I listen to it and he narrates it.
Mm.
And the way in which he speaks, because he's just an old folksy guy, and it's like it's your granddad talking to you about how to manage money. So again, this guy, because it's more modern, he does go into things about stock market and funds and shares and stuff like that. But it's in such a simple and easy to understand format, tone, structure that anybody could listen to it and be like, this is easy. I should do that.
Yeah.
So it's a really, really nice book as well. It's not too scary, really easy to get through. You'll fly through it, anybody that reads it.
Yeah.
So that's the second one.
Yeah.
And then the third one, I guess, building on that second one, is I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi.
Okay.
So he's a US based money coach. He's very popular now, but he's been going for, I think, 10 or 15 years. But in the
Yeah.
last 5 or 6 years, he's really found fame. Uh, he actually
Freedom
has
too,
a, well,
probably.
yeah. Yeah, oh yeah. He actually, for him, one of the big things that he hit big, his book is a multi-million copy selling book anyway,
Mm.
but he was featured or he had his own Netflix show.
Okay.
I forget what it's called. I think it might just be called I Will Teach or I Will Teach You to Be Rich, something like that. So if you're on Netflix, go check it out.
Okay.
But his book takes off from where J.L. Collins did in that they preach the same principles, the same
Mm.
behaviors, the same way to manage money, but he's far more, I don't want to say aggressive, he's far more direct
Okay.
about what you should do and what you should not do, and is much more tangible advice and steps. So if you're really looking for an action plan, I
Yeah.
will teach you to be rich. We'll give you like a really point by point action plan. You'll read each chapter and say, right, now I need to go and do this, this, and this.
Yeah.
And by the end of the book, you probably will be saving, investing, your budget's done, all that sort of stuff, and you'll be happy. But again, for some people, that's great because they're self-starters, they're confident with money, they can just go and do it. For others, they may need more hand-holding, but either way, that's quite a good book as well. So that's the third one. I will teach you to be rich.
Love it. That one sounds like one I should go and read immediately. So Rich Dad, Poor Dad didn't make your list.
Um, Interestingly, it wasn't the first book I read, but it's the
Yeah.
first one that opened my mind to what
Mm,
was possible.
yeah.
I know it's very popular,
Yes.
just because I think he hit that peak where people were getting interested in finance, and it was such
Mm.
an easy to
It was.
understand story.
Yes.
But the more and it did have a profound effect on me.
Yeah.
It really changed my mindset, or opened my mind, I guess, to changing my mindset.
Yeah.
But for me, there's a lot of oversimplification in that.
Okay.
And I found as well, it's quite biased. And
Mm.
what I mean by that is you can always tell somebody when I speak to clients
Yeah.
and they come to me
What
and
you're
they're
gonna
like,
say.
I need help with my money, blah, 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 but I've got this portfolio of properties.
I knew,
And I
I knew you
say,
were
have
gonna
you
say
read Rich
that.
Dad Poor Dad? They're like, yeah, I did. Because Robert Kiyosaki really pushes the agenda on buy properties, buy properties.
Yes.
Which again, it might work for some people, it might work for a lot of people, but I prefer to take a step back and say, what are my options? What are my goals? And which one of these is best matched to what I'm trying to achieve versus just go and buy property, which if you're fortunate, it aligns to what you want to achieve, great. But for some people, it doesn't. And then they're stuck with these properties, which, as I mentioned before, aren't particularly liquid. You can't get your money out very quickly. And they're like, well, what do I do? So, yeah, I prefer not to push that one out there too much. I think the others take you to the same place. They
Yeah.
don't have that sense of wow and amazement or shock factor that Robert Kiyosaki does, but I don't think you necessarily need that. I think just being aware that there's a better way to do things and getting your plan in place and working for you is probably a better thing to do than just blow your mind and then be like, right, I'm going to go and buy a property. Because typically that's what people do when they read Rich Dad Poor Dad, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah. There's the concept of you need seven streams of income or to be a millionaire. How true do you think that is? Because I've seen that that isn't true. I've seen people, again, coaches make six, seven, and eight figures purely through their coaching business, and blow that money too because they don't know how to invest and use
Yeah.
it wisely. But they've managed to generate that level of income. So I've seen that it's not true or it can be untrue. What
Mm.
do you think?
Um, Same. I think it could be true,
Mm.
but I think it's probably just an oversimplification, generalization. I don't know where that came from,
Hmm.
but if you've got six, seven streams of income, how much energy and attention are you giving to each of those? If you were to take all that energy and attention and give it to two streams of income, could you probably, if you've got six streams of income, you're probably capable of getting two of them to the same amount, then you've got six, because you're clearly a capable person if you've got six streams of income, right? So I'd question that. Um, Also, yeah, six streams of income is tough to manage. I think maybe the lesson that's coming from that is don't stop hustling, which I know is quite popular in some circles. So if you've got two or three streams of income and you're trying to hit this magic £1 million number, maybe just keep an open mind. Maybe there's just other opportunities where you can go. Don't just say, okay, I'm enough. I've hit my threshold. Just keep an open mind and be more hustle minded, I guess. Maybe the underlying message there. But yeah, I wouldn't take it literally and say I need six or seven streams of income.
Mm. Yeah, thank you.
No,
That's
that's right.
a good one to myth bust.
Yeah.
Another thing I've seen is that, especially a lot of female coaches who teach finance and investing, say that women are actually better at investing than men are. In your experience working with couples, who tends to be, and this is again not going to be a rule that can apply to everyone, who tends to be better with money, whether that's saving, whether that's investing, whether that's making better choices? What's the pattern that you've personally seen?
In all honesty, no pattern.
Okay.
Right. I predominantly work with couples,
Yeah.
and I do encourage both parties to be in our calls. But 9 times out of 10, probably 9.5 times out of 10, when they come to me, there's one person in the relationship who drives the
Yes.
money. They they they're the ones that keep records. They're the one that drives money decisions. The other person is just kind of along for the ride, and that could work for them. It also could not work for them. But there's no necessary pattern. So on some cases, it's the guy that's leading it. On some cases, it's the lady that's leading it. Personally, I don't generally ascribe to the whole in any situation, guys are better than girls or girls are better than
Mhm.
guys. Honestly, I think we're all equally capable and competent. But it's not just about ability and skills and experience. It's about emotions.
Yes.
That time of your life, is that the time of life that's good for you? Maybe 10 years before, maybe 10 years after, the right time and all of that. It's
Mm.
such a combination of things.
Mm.
Um, so I don't like those sort of comparisons because people also artificially put themselves down, give
Yes.
themselves an excuse not to step out because, oh, my wife's going to be better than this at me. I might as well just let her do it.
Yeah.
That's just defeatist. That is not, as we were saying, a millionaire mindset. You're
Yeah.
not allowing yourself to dream. You're not being intentional. You're not taking responsibility,
Mm.
right? If you want something, whether it's financial or not, want it, be clear that you want it, and then make a plan to go get it, regardless of what it is. So if you want to be better with money, just be better with money. Being better with money doesn't start when you're out of debt. Being better with money starts with you deciding that you're going to be out of debt, right? That's it. It's just a decision. It's a mindset away.
Love that. I love that. And imagine if both parties adopted that mindset, they would be
Absolutely.
killing it.
Absolutely. Which again is why I always encourage couples to work together.
Yeah.
Even if one of you continues to drive,
Yeah.
having the other person there that you can have an open conversation with to sound ideas against, to build that energy and that momentum and to keep yourself okay. Because I'm not going to be in the picture forever. I don't plan to be. We're there for a short period of time, three,
Yeah.
6 months. But after that, you need a support network to keep you going.
Yeah.
So yeah, complementary understanding of how you're going to manage your money to support your family is really important between the two.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. And it also kind of reminds me of some examples I've come across where one partner might want to be more involved and the other one doesn't let them. Maybe the guy is making a lot of money and he says, "Don't worry, babe, you just enjoy your Gucci handbags and I will take care of it." And she wants to know. She
Yeah.
wants to contribute. She wants to be a part of that. What are words you would say to that kind of man who's kind
Yeah.
of alpha or whatever you want to describe it as, like, wants to have full control, where actually she is totally capable and totally excited, and that's maybe even putting a burden on the relationship because she feels totally shut out from the financial conversation.
Yeah, so in all honesty, in my experience, I've not come across that yet. It's been the other way around,
Mm-mm.
where one partner's in charge of the finances and the other one just couldn't care less and just
Yeah.
does not want to get involved. But for either scenario, it's really just understanding why those emotions are there, whether they're because they're uninterested, why they're uninterested. Do they genuinely not care what happens with their life? Do
Yeah.
they genuinely not have goals? Do they feel like they've already given up because their goals aren't being met? And conversely, for the guy in your example, what does he think he might lose
Yes.
by just being a bit more open and transparent? Is
Mm.
it just the control element? If it is the control element, why does he feel that he needs to be in control? Is it because he doesn't trust the wife, or is it because he doesn't trust himself?
Mm-hmm.
So it could be any number of things. And then we border on relationship coaching versus money coaching. But it's good to have these conversations. And the coaching environment, especially with me, is one of those safe spaces where we can start to have those conversations.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's really just promoting open dialogue between the couple so they can start talking about it a little bit. And generally, what I found fairly fortunately, I guess, with the clients that I've been working with is as they start talking, they start mellowing out a little bit. And they
Mm.
start realizing that actually this isn't as bad or as scary as I thought it was going to be. I can actually see the bonuses here. And I think I may have mentioned earlier, I'm not sure, but a lot of times people only have conversations about money when things are bad
Yeah.
or there's a big decision that has to be made. That's the only time they talk about money. And generally, those have negative emotions attached to them: stress, anxiety, fear, anger.
Yeah.
But as they start talking to each other more and more and more, and they start working on their finances, they can start changing that conversation to something positive. Hey, we've got 500 quid saved up in our holiday fund and we haven't even booked a holiday. Where do we want to go on holiday? Right? That sort of thing. And having more forward-looking conversations so that we're not just talking about money when there's something serious happening. We're
Yeah.
talking about money on a more frequent basis. And that also helps to balance that power a little bit. Even if the guy still wants to manage everything, and it's my spreadsheet, I own it, well, fine. But if the wife also understands, maybe she can help you boost your progress towards your goals. You don't know until you try.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's no one clear answer. It's more a case of we just need to talk it out, see what's really going on. Is it something that's, achievable, solvable
Mm.
within here? Or I haven't experienced this myself, but there may be situations I imagine where maybe the relationship, there's something underlying
Yeah.
going on. It's not necessarily directly related to the money.
Yeah.
So yeah, they've got to talk ultimately.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. So I'm going to start winding down.
Sure.
And I always end with Stephen Bartlett's theme of asking my current guest a question left by the previous guest. So last episode we had Dr. Jay on. He's a colleague of mine. He works in holistic dentistry, and
Okay.
he didn't know who was coming on. So it's a random question that you will answer based on your interpretation.
Okay.
So the question is, what do you believe was a moment of transition for you? And it can be a transition in behavior or how you see the world, anything, any sort of transition. What do you believe was a moment where you experienced transition?
A couple come to mind,
Mhm.
but keeping with the theme of our conversation today, and ironically, because I didn't pick this as one of my books, but you called it out,
Mhm.
is Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Yeah.
Because as I say, it did have that shock and wow factor.
Yeah.
And the brief backstory to that, my mum bought me that book, or my mum and dad bought me
Mm.
that book for Christmas, I think, one year. But as I mentioned, I don't read books. So I duly brought it back home and put it in a drawer and forgot about it. And then 5 or 6 years later, now I'm married, and we went on our honeymoon a year after we got married. So quite a while after this book
Yeah.
was born. And one part of our trip was going to the Maldives. And both my wife and I are very active.
Yeah.
And we thought, we're going to the Maldives. We can't be active. We need to just chill out. So I
Yeah.
had this idea of, hey, let's just take a book each and we can
Wow.
read it. She's like, okay, great. So I went to this drawer of books and there's a few in there. And with no particular preference, just picked one out. Thought, right, let's take that. Took it with me, and we were in the Maldives for I think 5 days, and we didn't start reading the book until the second half of day three. So that's how active we'd been. We finally forced ourselves one afternoon to just hang out. We had these overwater villas, hang out on
Yeah.
the hammock sort of things, lying there. Right, what's this book all about? I think I finished it in about 4 hours, 5 hours, just cover to cover, just demolished it. And my mind was blown. I was like, holy cow, what? Like, I am an accountant. I am a tax advisor. I've been working in finance for the best part of 10, 12 years by that point. And this guy in this book is saying that I can do all these things. And I'm like, but it's true. I could do all these things. Why did I never think of this myself? So it's also a case of you could hear the same thing a
Yeah.
100 times in your life, but it only takes one articulation of it in a certain way at a certain time in your life when your mind's open to hearing it for it to make a difference. And that was it for me. I just heard it and I was like, wow, okay. So from that point, it changed everything. That's when I became really intentional with our finances. And so that would be a major, probably the biggest transition. And not to do a disservice to my eldest, but the second transition is probably when my daughter was
Yeah.
born.
I thought you were going to say that. And I was like, oh, okay. It was a book.
Yeah. But yeah, the second transition was a few years later when my eldest was born. And yeah, as anyone would tell you, when you become a parent, it's like complete upheaval of everything you thought you knew. For the better and for the worse in some cases, but mostly for the better. And we're still riding that storm. So I'll let you know in 10 years how it turns out.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you read the book in the Maldives and you're probably like, I could do this holiday like every year. But
Yeah.
I read this when my parents actually gave it to me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Love it. Love it. And so, what question would you leave for our next guest? And it doesn't have to be finance related. It can be an
Hmm.
absolutely, or it could be just anything that comes to mind.
Okay. It's a little bit finance related.
That's fine.
What is one, and you're familiar with this question. What is one aspect of what you dream your best life to be? And what are you doing today to achieve that?
Yeah, love it, love it,
Yeah.
love it. Love that so much. And for those who have made it this far, you can book in with Vig. You have these insight
Yes,
sessions. They're
that's
very
correct.
good.
Yeah.
I've had one myself. So, speaking from experience, they are amazing. Do you want to just give us a little summary of what happens in those sessions?
Yeah, absolutely. So the insight session is a one-off coaching session. It's about 2 to 3 hours generally.
Mhm.
But what we basically do is we cover off a bit of theory around money management, how to better set up your accounts, how to better think about your expenses so that you can relieve any stress or anxiety you might have on an ongoing basis about how your money is being managed. That's the first half of the call typically. In the second half of the call, we go through your own finances. So there is some prep work involved for this session.
Mhm.
Once you book in with me, we pick a date and time, you'll get emailed with a spreadsheet and a questionnaire. You just fill those out, send them over to me. I'll spend about half a day kind of going through them, coming up with some strategies, some ideas. But then we go through your finances pretty much line by line.
Yeah.
And what we're trying to do is look at where you are today with your finances. We look at where you want to get to with your finances. And then through that session, we'll come up with a plan to get you there. A common analogy, because I haven't called out this analogy yet, that I like to use with that is Google Maps. Whenever you need to get somewhere, you open your phone, and what's the first piece of information that you need? Everyone always tells me, "Oh, I need to know where I want to go." I'm like, "No, you need to know where you are today." That's the first piece of information, your starting point. Second piece of information is your finishing point. Then you can figure out how to get from A to B. That's essentially what we do in this session. But what I will call out is just before we get into that, because obviously that's a 2 to 3 hour session, I do also offer a free 15, 20-minute conversation called a Q&A call, which people can book in with me. So then they can explain to me a little bit about, the challenges they're going through. I can talk to them about coaching. We can see if we're a good fit for each other because coaching is a really personal relationship.
Yeah.
So it's really important that we vibe, that we get along with each other, so that we can get the most value out of ongoing coaching. And then if we've had that Q&A call and you're all set to go, we can get you booked in for the insight session. And then if that goes well, there is also the option of ongoing coaching, but that depends on what it is you need, whether you even need it. And we talk about that towards the end of the insight session. If you wanted to find out any information, I'm sure Raji will post in the notes section, but I have a website, I have an Instagram. We'll post the links, and you can check me out there.
Amazing. Thank you so much. That was really
No
insightful.
problem. Thank you. It's really enjoyable being here and chatting to you.
Thank you so much. So I'll be in touch soon and I'm going to say bye.
Bye.